sales is the most lucrative skill in the world, period. The problem is most sales advice out there today is outdated, cheesy, and can even keep you from getting the deals that can make all the difference in your career. This is the No BS Sales School, a podcast for entrepreneurs and salespeople who want to master the skill of selling without all the BS. Listen, if you're like me, you hate doing admin crap. Number one, because you're not good at it. And number two, because you know it's taking you away from the stuff that actually makes you money. So why are you doing it? Do what I did. Go to worksby.com right now and let them pair you with a real executive assistant. Once I started working with Cheryl at Worksby, my income went up 40% in 1 month, and my working hours went from 70 down to 40. It's a game changer. Go to worksby.com right now, book a call, and tell them Walker sent you. If you do, you'll get 2 extra hours of service for free as a bonus. So if you're ready to finally stop doing the stuff you hate and focus on the stuff that makes you money, go to worksby.com right now. That's WORXBEE.com. Tell them Walker sent you, and you'll get those 2 free hours. Welcome to the No BS Sales School podcast. I'm your host, Walker McKay. I'll talk to you about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, about the importance of managing people's expectations. And I want you to listen today because I will give you some specific advice about why it's important to do that and how to do it in so many circumstances. Somebody told me that 99.99% of relationships that end badly do so because somebody didn't manage the other person's expectations. I don't know what the other 0.01% reason that a relationship ends badly, but that would probably be, God knows what it is. I'm not sure I want to know. But it's true. Think about your personal relationships, the ones that just failed, probably because somebody didn't manage somebody else's expectations. The big deal in sales, because what we're supposed to be doing is building trust, right? Sales is ultimately having somebody trust you enough to give you money to make a problem go away. Trust you enough to give you money to make a problem go away. That's what sales is, done well. Well, the first part of that is trust, right? And the way that you build trust with somebody is that they know what to expect. So it begins with little things, right? I want to have no surprises in my interactions. This is true in life. As many of you know, I am ADHD off the freaking charts. And one of the things I get really, I can't sit in my seat very long, especially if I don't know how long I'm going to be sitting in my seat, right? If somebody says this meeting's going to last 30 minutes, all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I can focus for 30 minutes. If they say it's an hour, I can say, all right, I can figure that out. But if I'm just not sure if it's going on and on and on, I'm going to blow up and leave. So here's advice if you're dealing with me. Let's confirm at the beginning of the meeting how much time this is going to last, how much time you need or how much time we need to have this conversation. If you're dealing with me, please do that. I'll try to do the same with you. I did an exercise with some of my clients a couple of years ago, back when we could get together, to kind of illustrate this point of how, again, going back to sales, how we're often are in, we and our prospects are often on completely different pages, and typically that goes unresolved. So I did a thing where I took half my classes in the room and sent them outside in the hallway, and I said, and I closed the door and I visited with them and I said, okay, you guys are salespeople. This is a role play. You are salespeople, and you've got your ideal prospect. You've got a meeting with your ideal prospect. How much time do you need to see if they're going to be the right fit, to do your sales pitch, that kind of stuff? Typically, the answer I get from the group is somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour. Great. Next question I ask is, who would you hope would do most of the talking? They answered this correctly by saying they want the prospect to do most of the talking. Of course you do. You got to understand them, right? You can't understand them if they're not doing most of the talking. And the last question I had was, how would you hope this meeting would end? And they said, well, shit, we want a check and a contract. We want the deal to be done. Makes perfect sense, right? Ideal outcome. So I left them outside. I go back inside the classroom and I said, hey, you all are business owners. You've got a salesperson, you look at your calendar and you see you've got an appointment with a salesperson in about 5 minutes that your assistant put on your calendar. You don't even know what it's about. You just know it's a salesperson. You're busy. How much time do you want to spend with this person? Typical answer is somewhere between 2 minutes and 5 minutes. Who would you hope would do most of the talking? They, of course, say the salesperson. And how would you hope that meeting would end? And most of the time they said they leave their information, including pricing, get the hell out of my office. Tell me something. Would you be much different than either one of those two parties? If you're the sales guy, would you want something much different than that? If you're the owner or the buyer, would you want something much different than what they said? We're both walking into these meetings with completely different ideas of what good looks like. And so until somebody manages the other person's expectations, until we come to an agreement together, we're like two buzzsaws running into each other that are bound to piss each other off or let each other down, which ideally should not be part of good sales, right? Pissing people off and letting people down is generally not going to be your best tactic. Even in a no BS way, that's not a good way to do that. So think about the importance of this and the applications of just managing expectations in everyday life. And I heard this guy whom I really like, and if you're not following him on LinkedIn and maybe Twitter, Todd Capone, he's been a podcast guest of mine. He's a really smart as shit guy. He studies, he's really cool. He studies historical sales. What was sales training like? What were they talking about in the 1900s, in 1910? Right, but he talks, his big deal is transparency, about being completely transparent so that nobody's surprised. We have very similar beliefs there, but his book is called The Transparency Sale. If you hadn't read it, I highly recommend it. What he talks about is, he gives an example, which I think is great. He talks about if you were somebody and you're recommending a bike ride to somebody else, a mountain bike ride, and you tell somebody you should go down that trail, it's beautiful, you'll love it. Okay, there's one group. And then the next group you say, this is a really great trail. However, it's very technical. There's a lot of rocks and bumps and roots and fallen trees, and you may have to pick your bike up a couple of times to go over those things. The climb at the very end is hard as hell, feels like it's vertical. It's a 5-mile trail, which you would normally assume would take about an hour. I'm going to tell you that because of the technical nature of this trail, it takes you 2.5 hours instead of an hour. They say yes and take my advice and go. What's going to be the different reaction? Same trail. The first group would probably be shocked, stunned, exhausted. What might they say about that trail? Holy shit, that sucked. Oh my God, that was miserable. Second group, who would have had exactly the same experience, except for their expectations would have been managed, right? They would have known that the last part sucked. They would have known they'd have to do the technical stuff. So when they finished, right, there were no surprises there. And they might say, holy shit, that was amazing. Maybe they'll say it was hard, but that won't be the main focus of their comments. I think about my fishing guide in Maine, I think about all the time. Pete, great guy. And Pete will take us to a place and he'll say, today we're going to fish here. He goes, you won't catch many fish, but the ones you catch will be big ones. He said, a good day today is if you catch 2 fish. Okay, my expectations are managed. I'm prepared to catch up to 2 fish. I expect to catch 35 or 40 fish, like we might another day at another place. Maybe if you hadn't managed my expectations, I might have been pissed because we only caught 2 instead of 35 or 40, but I knew what to expect. That's the most we can ask for. The reason people get pissed off a lot of times is because something happens they didn't expect and they don't know how to handle it. So if you're a professional, you're supposed to know what happens next. You're supposed to let your client know what they're probably going to experience. That's how you build trust. If some part of working with you is going to be painful for them, you need to tell them. One of the things I like to tell my clients is when we get started working together, the first thing will happen is you'll say, wow, this is cool as hell. Man, I had no idea that sales could be like this. I had no idea we could be this transparent and tell the truth. I had no idea what the buyer's code was. I had no idea that I could actually have a relationship with somebody like this, we understand each other and we trust each other in such a quick period of time. That's the first thing. Pretty soon though, 3 or 4 months down the road, I say, here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna know that this is the right way. The process that I show you is great. However, you're not gonna be able to make it come out of your mouth and you're gonna get pissed. And you're gonna say to yourself, this is too hard. I wanna quit. This is bullshit. It won't work. And what I'll tell you is when you get there, I'm gonna say, it's okay. This is where everybody gets. This means you're trying. And what I would tell you to do is take one thing you've learned that week with me and put it into place. Try it. And then let's talk about it the following week. And we'll get a result there. And then we'll try something else. Take one piece at a time. Don't eat the elephant all in one bite, right? If you tell somebody that's what's going to happen, then when that happens, they're not scared. They know this is what normal is. So I have a client right now that has hired a new sales guy. And the sales guy's coming from the competitor. And he's the #1 sales guy from the competitor, which I normally don't recommend, but this is a different situation and it's okay. But I told him the guy agreed to come to the new company. Has agreed to come to my client's company to work there, which is awesome. But he's got to wait a week for various reasons to quit, to tell his boss because of a compensation thing, or if he hangs on another week, he'll get his bonus check. So he's got a week. So what happens? And he's already agreed to come over. So I was talking to my client and I said, hey, when you asked him how he was going to respond when his boss whined and cried and offered to match the deal you offered him so he'd stay, what did he say? My client said, didn't do that. And I said, do you think it might happen that your competitor losing his #1 sales guy to his competitor to you, do you think that would cause him any concern enough maybe to match your offer, beg and whine and plead for the guy to stay? And my client said, yes. And I said, then you need to warn your new sales guy. You need to tell him. And I said, do it just like I said. Hey, when you thought about going to resign to your boss, and he starts whining and crying and saying, oh my God, please don't leave me. I'll match whatever. I'll pay you more. How are you going to respond? So my client called the sales guy and the sales guy said, I'll tell him that I'm not going to stay. I've already made up my mind. Right? But this person is now prepared for that conversation, will not be caught off guard, because when you get caught off guard, that's when you do stupid shit. Remember, my mother had her money with a financial advisor. It was a stockbroker years ago. And I didn't believe that stockbroker had my mom's best risk tolerance. He didn't get the risk. She was in all kinds of what I thought were inappropriate investments. And so I asked her to move her money to more of a money manager style person. And so she did. What I didn't warn her about was, though, do you think the guy that y'all been working with for 30 years, who maybe has had you in inappropriate investments, do you think he'll call? And she would have said yes. So I didn't warn her about that. And so the guy called and he yelled at her and he told her she was stupid for moving the money. And it was a very awful experience for my mom. She was caught off guard. And I wish I had said, hey, Mom, do you think so-and-so is going to call? What do you think he's going to say? How will you handle it when he calls you angry? And what my mom probably would have screwed up the courage to say was, well, I'll tell him that we've had a good run here, but it's time we moved on to someone else who is more appropriate for what we're looking for now. She would have been prepared for that. And if her old broker never called her back, she could have let it go away. Right? But it's so important to manage expectations. You're the professional, you're supposed to know what happens next. I also don't want us to assume something's going to happen and then not give the other person any notice of that. So the hell do I mean by that? So like, if somebody asks you to do something, if somebody asks you to bring them a proposal, if somebody asks you to do an analysis for them, if somebody asks you to give them pricing or whatever, do that. But what I want you to do is find out, hey, if I'm okay doing this for you, will you do this for me? If I'm okay coming over to meet with you like you asked, will you be okay having the right people in the room for us to make a decision about whether or not it makes sense to work together? I'll be happy to do what it was. I'll be happy to do that analysis for you. Let's pretend I do, and you like what you see. What do you see happening next? I want to make sure we're all on the same page. I want to make sure that what I think is going to happen is what they think is going to happen. That I at least understand where they're coming from. If I don't like their answer, if I say, hey, let's pretend I do this for you and you like what you see, what do you see happening next? And they say, well, I'm going to send it back to my current guy and see if he can beat it. You can say, sounds like not something I want to do. Right? Beforehand, there's a rule we talk about is you can't get mad at your prospect for doing something you didn't tell them they couldn't do. You can't get mad at your prospect for doing something you didn't tell them they couldn't do. So if you are pissed off because your prospect sent your proposal over to somebody else, but you hadn't already said up front, hey, I'll be glad to give you our information. If I'm okay doing that, will you be okay keeping it to yourself, not sharing it with the person you're working with now? See, the time to ask those things is before you do them, before you give the information, before you give the proposal, before you drive over there. I do this for you, will you do this for me? Let's not have any mutual mystification about, oh, I thought this was going to happen. Here's something else to manage expectations about. Let's pretend somebody agrees with you. Hey, yeah, at the end of this meeting, we'll decide whether or not we want to get started. Well, I know what I think get started means. But do you know what the prospect thinks get started means? Maybe get started then means they send this thing off to their board for approval. And you thought get started meant they write you a check. Somebody says get started, or something vague or that you're not sure what it means, say, listen, I appreciate that. Do you mind telling me what that means to you? So that you understand. We need to know. There is no shame in trying to understand what our prospect's talking about. Something else what you think about too is that people want to do what other people like them do. They want to do what other people like them do. Nobody, well, I'm sure there are a few, but most people don't want to be a weirdo. Right? They want to do what other people like them do. They see some congruence there. So what I'll tell you is most of our prospects don't know how to hire us. They do not hire us. They also often don't know what good looks like. All they know is what they've been getting. So I was having some trouble with my neck a couple months ago, and I went to a new massage therapist who's awesome. Erin, if you're in Columbia, I'd be happy to refer you to her. But Erin told me something after our first massage thing. She worked on my neck. She said, my best clients typically schedule every 2 weeks until their issues are really worked out. And then we move probably to a once a month schedule. So all of a sudden I was like, okay, great. If that's what people normally do, That's what I'd like to do. I wouldn't have had any idea that normal was scheduling every 2 weeks. But she told me that, and I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And now I'm on the once a month schedule with her. So I thought about that. I was like, shit, how many of us forget to tell our prospects or our clients, typically somebody we work with is doing this and this and this, right? Let them know what good looks like. Think about where in your relationships, where in your sales process, you need to be managing expectations. Is it at the end, after you have sold them, after you've gotten the contract, where you need to say, hey, I need to tell you, our process is not going to be perfect. This is not going to be, I would love to tell you that we have a perfect onboarding process. It's really not. We work very hard to make it the best we can. But just know there seems to be a screw up every single time, and there'll probably be one in our situation. Here's what I want you to do if you notice something that isn't the way you expect it to be. I want you to pick up the phone and call me and let me know, and we'll get to the bottom of it. Chances are, if there's something going wrong, I will find it before you do. But if not, you pick up the phone, you call me, and we'll get right on it. What people get mad about was they get surprised and they don't know what to do. So take away the surprise and take away they don't know what to do. This is probably going to happen. Here's what I do when this happens. This is how you build trust. This is how you build lifelong clients, because everybody knows what you sell is not perfect. It's not. If you tell somebody it's perfect, you're a liar. Let them know how it's not perfect, why it might not be the right fit. Let them decide if they're okay with those things. That's being honest. That's being no BS. No BS sales team, I appreciate you very much. You would help me. Here's what I would love for you to do. If you're listening to this podcast and you are enjoying it, and you say, I really learned something from this, post a link to the podcast on social media with what you learned. Helps me tremendously. Would you post the link to the podcast with a message of what you learned in the podcast? One other thing I would ask is, if that doesn't suit you, then send this podcast to one person you know that needs to hear it, just one, that might appreciate a specific message or the podcast in general. Send it to. One more thing I'll mention, I have a program that I've been doing for about a year with entrepreneurs and founders of companies. And it's something that I kind of started on a lark, working with people that were growing a company. And typically they're doing at least $1 million in volume, maybe a little bit more, maybe a lot more. But their goal is to really grow. And growth can happen through a lot of things: change in strategy, change in structure. It can be a new sales, hiring a new sales team. It can be adding to your sales team, any number of things. But I've had a total of, I want to take a maximum of 6. And I now have 1 spot open for another founder, entrepreneur, who is in a place where they say, I am ready to make this thing grow and do it the right way with the right people. And it's expensive. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's expensive. And the way that you should consider this, or the reason, is if you say, if I really got things right, if I got my business humming, if I got the sales part right, if I got if I got our processes working correctly, I could easily make another $100,000, $150,000, or profit another $150,000, $200,000 in the company, right? If that's where you are, then, or at least, right? And so if that's where you are, it might make sense for us to talk. That way, you won't think it's so expensive, right? As I tell people, it's only expensive if it doesn't work. WS sales team, I love you. Appreciate you very much. Please do share this with one person. Email me, walker@walkermckay.com, if I can help you.